We're so honored to have an incredible array of experts here with us, and the CBD panel is definitely one that I myself am very much looking forward to. And I would like to introduce you to our wonderful moderator, David Hutchinson, who goes by Hutch. And I also want to say that we have very special guests here who will be coming up on stage. We have Hayley Rose here with us, as well as her mom. Welcome, Hayley. So please give me a round of applause for Hayley and her mom to come up on stage, and I'll let Dr. Hornby share a few words before Hutch starts the panel moderation.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. My name is David Hutchinson. I'm moderating this panel. Just want to point out to you, those that maybe didn't catch it, because people are coming into the room all the time. The young lady on the end is Hayley Rose with her mother Cheryl. Hayley had severe seizure disorder and actually has a strain of cannabis named after her called Hayley's Comet. And she is where she is today in her good health down to this plant. So I'll give you Hayley Rose. Okay, I'd like to do a quick introduction to the three wonderful guest speakers we have here, or panel. But I'm going to just give you a very short summary of their achievements and their involvement, simply because we only have 30 minutes and the clock is running now, so we will have a short chance for some questions at the end as well, if any of you have them. At the far end, Martin A. Lee. Martin is author of numerous books and the co-founder and director of Project CBD. Next along is Dr. Paul Hornby. Paul is a scientist, researcher, and well-known advocate and patient supporter here in BC. He's a self-professed hippie and lab rat. And then immediately on my left here, Dr. Charles Whitfield. He's a best-selling author of Healing the Child Within. He's written 14 books on healing, and his intent is to demystify illness, cannabis, and the healing process. So I'd like to start off, I have a number of questions I'd like to pose to the panel. I'd like to start off with a question about CBD. Does it matter if CBD is extracted from industrial hemp or marijuana? And I'd like to start with Martin on that, please.
Oh boy, that's gotten me into trouble. Yes and no. Yes, in the real world, in that when you consider the source of CBD available in terms of what's in industrial hemp, there's relatively little in there compared to those unique high resin marijuana strains that they're drug strains, drug plants, that happen to be high in CBD and very low in THC. There's not many of those, but there's few of those around. Since you get a lot more from the cannabis plant of the CBD, 20%, something like the AC/DC strain, which is very prevalent in California, where I'm from, it's a lot more than the typical maybe 3.5% you get in the actual legitimate industrial hemp strains that you can actually grow from seed. There's a whole illegitimate or extra legitimate industrial hemp industry thriving around CBD, but it's problematic in some ways. It's really a matter of quantity versus quality. You can get a lot from growing a lot of industrial hemp. If you can grow tens of thousands of plants, you can extract a lot of CBD, even if there's only a little bit of CBD in the plants. But you're not going to get the quality you're going to get from a 20% plant cannabis. So, and then the proof is in the pudding, though. It's in the products themselves. Vape pens are prevalent now. Vape cartridges filled with cannabis oil, both THC dominant and sometimes CBD dominant. Those hemp oil extracts, or CBD, I've never found one that I think it would be even safe to inhale, because they all require a thinning agent, and propylene glycol, when overheated, is a carcinogen. And you can't make a really good product, a good quality vape pen oil out of industrial hemp extracts or the paste that you get, at least that we've seen. We have just never found one. You have the same problem sometime with cannabis in terms of how the vape cartridges are made, the oil for the vape cartridges. So that's an example of, in the real world, in terms of the choices you have, if you can opt for something within a medical marijuana context, a CBD from a high resin plant, you're better off, I think, from industrial hemp, although you can get some decent quality products there too if you're careful.
Thank you. Did Paul or Charles, do either of you want to make any comment?
Do I need to turn this on? No.
No, it is on. It's difficult for us to hear for the sound guys at the back. It's actually difficult for us to hear our own voices. Paul, you should be live now.
It's what I call the three-way split. The genetics that you go to for CBD are different than the genetics that you go to for THC. For example, hemp genetics are high CBD, low THC. Recreational genetics, or BC bud as we call it, is high THC, low CBD. If you cross those two genetics, 1 in 4 will come out what I call a 50-50 strain, which is equal THC and CBD. That's what we used to end Hayley's seizures in the beginning. In the early days, we used a 50-50 strain because it was the only CBD we could find available. Back to the high CBD, low THC strains, like in the hemp genetics, in my data banks, there's more than 15,000 cannabinoid profiles run by high-pressure liquid chromatography. If I overlay all of those profiles, which are hemp, recreational, many different strains of cannabis, I only see the 3 different ratios of THC to CBD. In the hemp genetics, the CBD can go to 20%, but the THC will rarely go over 1%. That's why this 0.3, 0.2% THC really bothers me, because no hemp genetics can ever go over 1%, because the genes that code for the CBD and THC are co-dominant. They're either turned on or they're turned off. So you're either getting a lot of CBD production and a little bit of THC, or a lot of THC production and a little bit of CBD, or roughly 50-50. This is argued a lot, but the molecular geneticists have shown this too, that those genes that code for those cannabinoids are co-dominant, so they're either there or they're not. The 50-50 strain that we used with Hayley came from Vancouver Island. When Hayley was first brought to me by her mom almost 10 years ago, she had just vaped Hayley at Mark Emery's Vapor Lounge and noticed an immediate change in her mood and her pre-seizure activity. When she came to me, she knew that I was into standardized oral preps of cannabis. 2 days after meeting Hayley, a young, what I call a hippie kid from the island, comes into the dispensary wanting to sell some of his cannabis. My job was to run it and to see how much CBD and THC were there before the club would buy it. When I ran this sample, the first peak to come out is CBD, and it started going up and up and up, and I started to get really excited because I knew I had something that might help Hayley, and the kids started to cry. To make a long story short, I asked this guy a while ago why he cried that day, and he said, I was just having a really bad day. But what we had is medicine that eliminated Hayley's seizures for almost a month overnight. She quit seizing. Then at a month, when she had her period, there was a small cluster. And this has gone on for roughly 10 years, but we've had a significant reduction in her seizure frequency by giving her what we now call Hayley's Comet, a 50-50 strain. I'm going on way too long. We've got too little time. I'll shut up.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'd like to ask, how do you explain CBD delivery methods and dosing to the people that you assist? Charles?
Well, it's interesting. I hope you can hear me with all that tumult out there, and I hope at the next conference this won't happen. But let's try to focus, and let me try to tell you what I do. I'm a medical doctor, and I help people get off of painkillers and other addicting drugs, including psychiatric drugs, from Prozac to all these toxic antipsychotics. And what I found in my practice, which my wife Barbara and I do out of our home office in Atlanta, Georgia, about half of my patients who are addicted to painkillers or any of these other bad drugs are already using cannabis without telling anybody to get off, because cannabis decreases the withdrawal symptoms. And it's to come off, I don't know if anybody tried to come off of painkillers, but they're pretty rough to try to stop. If you try to stop Prozac suddenly, or Seroquel, or any other of these toxic drugs, the same thing happens. There's a big withdrawal, there's a big rebound when you stop the drug. Half of my patients are already using cannabis, and I have to coax it out of them often that, have you ever used it? And they say, yeah. I say, how often, and what's the result? And they explain it to me that it's helpful, that they get stoned in the evening so that they can sleep through this bad withdrawal. The other half of my patients who are addicted to these drugs, I have to teach how to use it. And the way I start is just with CBD, not with any THC involvement, because the state in the U.S. where we live is Georgia, and we don't have it legal yet, and we have a bare minimal medical marijuana program. So I help people get started on CBD, and I will often show them right in the session how to vape it, and they see an immediate calming. The whole thing that says CBD is not psychoactive is bullshit. CBD is psychoactive. It is calming. That's psychoactivity. The contrast is, though, that THC is so dramatically psychoactive that it overshadows CBD's psychoactivity in our understanding of the drug. So I have found this whole plant, whether it's with or without THC, to be of great benefit in helping my patients get off of these toxic drugs.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. This is a really tough question. What is the best CBD-THC ratio, Martin?
I don't think there is one best CBD to THC ratio. In California, we're lucky that we have access to very good quality cannabis oils with varying ratios of THC and CBD. Some CBD dominant with little THC, some THC dominant, just the opposite, with every possibility in between. And generally what we're observing, and I'm not a doctor, we don't practice medicine at Project CBD, we're an educational group, but what we observe in terms of dosage and ratio, what people are actually using, it's clearly that it's a great experiment that's unfolding, that there is not one right dosage or right ratio for everybody, and that low doses actually can be very, very effective, and that to the extent that we would venture to provide any kind of guidance in terms of ratio and dosage, it would be particularly for people new into the cannabis scene, people who are attracted because they hear about the miraculous powers of CBD, and that it's not psychoactive like THC. That draws a lot of people, new people, into the cannabis world. And basically our guidance, if you will, is experiment low dose, start low dose with a high CBD to THC ratio, and then adjust the psychoactivity. It's almost like playing a trombone. A little more THC, a little higher dose is going to be more stony. Find that sweet spot, and the sweet spot generally to aim for, what we would suggest, is just before it crosses that sort of vivid psychoactive threshold. Before you get high, that seems to be a really good healing point. And of course, you don't know that point until you go past it. And a lot of people discover, even if they're skittish, reefer madness baggage about getting high, that they actually like it. So, and that's okay too. But that's a real sort of a boiled down summation of some of what we're seeing. And it's very, very exciting because the applicability of CBD and THC, and you always have to include them together for maximum effect, in my opinion, is really exciting in terms of the diverse range of conditions that and people that it can help.
Thank you. I'd like to ask, this is a question for two of you, I think, at this stage, but about the interaction between CBD and THC. There has been some mention of it by Charles, but I'd like to ask Paul about that, please. The interaction between THC and CBD, the synergy between the two.
About 2.5 months ago, I fell from a ladder in Spain showing off to a younger employee and broke my leg and elbow in 2 places. I was in hospital for a week, had 2 surgeries, and all I've used for post-operative pain is hemp flower extract, meaning the trichome from the hemp flower. There's virtually no THC in that, but I did notice that in the first few days in the hospital, the opiates synergized very well with the CBD capsules I was taking. They're standardized 50 milligrams of CBD, and they also have a very high beta-caryophyllene content, which is a terpenoid. I'm not getting to the point of the question is how does THC and CBD interact, but I did notice that when I topped up on high CBD doses, and at night if I smoked a joint where there was indica or sativa, a high THC, I would go to sleep. Often a sativa will keep me awake, but this didn't happen. This is preconditioning with cannabidiol. So I believe that to answer the question in a very general way, that CBD and THC synergize in their activity. They work together. They will increase pain relief. They will increase appetite. They work together. And I would never, ever say that pure CBD or pure THC is good for anyone. My whole thing about the medical thing on cannabis has been what we call the entourage effect. They work together. They work with their brothers and sisters. THC by itself is very different than the effect of THC in the same concentration with CBD around CBC, CBG, the other cannabinoids and terpenoids. I believe that synthetic cannabidiol can be dangerous. It's a potent blocker of what we call the cytochrome P450 enzyme system in the human liver, and synthetic CBD can potentially lead to an overdose of any pharmaceutical drug or even THC itself. So the answer to the question is CBD and THC work together. The ratios are very important. We're still looking at what ratios are the most effective. In terms of epilepsy, we've had very good success with a 20 to 1 CBD to THC ratio. This is in Europe, and I believe we'll see the same thing here.
Okay, thank you. Martin, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, just real quickly. The synergy is key between THC and CBD, but the whole plant, as we just heard, is really crucial in terms of ensemble effect or entourage. But specifically, CBD and THC, alluded to the cytochrome P450, that CBD interferes with the metabolism of a lot of different drugs, both innate compounds and compounds we would take from outside. And CBD will inhibit delay the metabolism of THC. So that means that THC stays in the system longer. It doesn't break down while the THC is co-present. So it extends the high, but it also lowers the ceiling on the high, because you can get very technical with it. CBD actually changes the shape of the receptor, the CB1 receptor that Dr. Honus was referring to earlier. So it makes it, that THC kind of binds to it differently and not as potently, you might say. So it can kind of lower the high but extend the effect. That's called a negative allosteric modulator. And it turns out that CBD does these weird things to receptors, all kinds of receptors in the brain, not just cannabinoid receptors. It really works in many, many different ways.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask, does the method of extraction impact the efficacy of CBD and other cannabinoids or terpenes? So how important is the method of extraction? And I'll put that to Paul first.
I've often said that CO2 extraction is the ultimate way of extracting any cannabinoid because it's an edible solvent. You're breathing it right now. And then there are the organic solvents, which often contain heavy metals, which if you concentrate, you could contaminate with heavy metals or even pesticides. So the extraction method is very important. Then it also depends on what you're extracting. If you're extracting green bud, you have the problem of getting chlorophyll into the extract, and that makes it taste bad and smoke bad. So you want to avoid chlorophyll often. We've found that by extracting trichome with ethanol, we avoid chlorophyll contamination, and that also saves a lot of costs on CO2 extraction. So either ethanol, which is an edible solvent, or CO2, I guess, are the ultimate forms of extraction. In terms of efficiency, ethanol is roughly equal to CO2 in that you'll get the same amount of CBD into your extract with either solvent. And as I was saying, the many organic solvents such as hexane or IPA or those solvents are toxic to humans, and you want to eliminate them. So in the final step, you would want to do a heated vacuum prep if you're using that type of solvent. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you. And Martin, any comments on extraction methods?
Yeah, I concur with the remarks that the challenge with supercritical CO2 is terpene retention, is that they burn off easy, at least the monoterpenes. So it's a bit of a trade-off. You get a very, very clean product when you extract with carbon dioxide as a solvent. But the challenge is how to retain the kind of full spectrum of medicine in the plant.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask Charles, how do you specifically use CBD in your medical and counseling practice?
In almost every patient that I see over the last couple of years, I have to think, how can cannabidiol help this patient, no matter what their condition? Now, my practice specializes in a few areas. I do general psychiatry, but I do addiction medicine and trauma psychology. So for all of those, CBD is a great help. And I try to educate my patients to learn what it is and how to use it. And we've got flyers out on the far table over there from my wife's, Barbara's book called The Secrets of Medicinal Marijuana. Now, not necessarily for this audience, because you guys are pretty well sophisticated about it, but for other people, in our book, we cover a lot about CBD. And I would refer you to Martin Lee's Project CBD to learn more about it, and I refer my patients to that frequently. So I spend probably at least a quarter of the time of most of my patients talking about CBD one way or the other, with or without THC, and it's been a big help. Now the problem is that some of my patients can't get it, and they can't get a response, either whether it's sublingual or whether it's vaped or whether it's smoked the old-fashioned way, so or ingested. So I just kind of gentle them along with trying to learn about this amazing plant.
Thank you. A question for for Martin, how does single molecule CBD compare to whole plant CBD-rich cannabis in terms of therapeutic effect?
Single molecule versus whole plant. Well, Dr. Harnous, who we heard from earlier, he was involved in co-authoring a study that came out last year that addressed this in a very interesting way. Very succinctly, some Israeli medical scientists compared the effects of a CBD-rich oil, one of these 20-to-1 oils, to a single molecule synthetic CBD. It was an animal study, and they looked at markers of inflammation and these kind of things to determine therapeutic effect. In essence, what they found, that single molecule CBD required very high doses and had a very narrow therapeutic window. To be effective, you had to be very exact in the amount in terms of what you were to get the effect you were looking for. A little bit too low, a little bit too high, no effect. Whereas with the CBD-rich oil, the effect was proportionate to the amount that you gave. You give a little bit, you had a little bit of an effect, a little more, et cetera, until it kind of plateaued out and maybe even dipped a little with higher doses. But so the good news is that both single molecule and whole plant CBD can be effective. The challenge, but according to this study by one of the great eminent scientists in this whole field, the co-discoverer of anandamide, whole plant CBD, they concluded, the oils from whole plant CBD therapeutically much more likely to be effective than that, that perfect target that you have to hit. But we have to also recognize that, we're seeing with GW studies of Epidiolex, which is almost all pure CBD, great effectiveness in certain cases of pediatric epilepsy. So we shouldn't knock either. We should make sure that there's space that we can access both types of medicine, because clearly there's going to be pharmaceutical single molecule legal in the United States and elsewhere very soon if it's not already. But we have to make sure that the whole plant oils, we can access them, because that's our birthright as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. And then a question for Paul. Do you believe synthetic CBD can be dangerous?
Yes, I do too. Because of its potent blocking of what I just mentioned, the cytochrome P450 enzyme in the human liver, which is a tremendously polymorphic enzyme, meaning you inherit it from mom and dad, and it changes between individual to individual. Studies have shown that synthetic CBD is a potent blocker of subfamily 2A and 3C, which metabolize most pharmaceutical drugs. If indeed you block this enzyme, the level of a pharmaceutical drug can go up in your blood and in your brain, potentially leading to an overdose. And this kind of scares me. The hemp flower extract has enzyme inducers as well as enzyme blockers, and no incidents when we've been using it with epileptic children, have we ever seen any overdose with any of the pharmaceutical drugs that they've been on at the same time. In fact, we're working with, right now, Slovenia, Croatia, Macedonia, Israel, and Spain, and Canada, grouping together all of the children under 20 years old using natural cannabis extract for epileptic seizures. And we're also looking at ones that have taken the synthetic CBD as well, and we'll be comparing notes. Our doctor in Slovenia did prescribe synthetic CBD and then went back onto the natural product after 2 of the children began seizing more. Like I said earlier, I'm a great believer in whole plant medicine. I don't believe in synthetic single molecule magic bullets. The cannabinoids work with their brothers and sisters, and the terpenoids as a whole plant medicine.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, and we're just so you know, we're at the time, the clock is running out, so I'm just going to ask for a couple of words from each of you. What areas of research would you like to see with CBD and other cannabinoids? What areas would you like the research community to focus on? We just have a couple of words each. Martin?
I think one of the most exciting areas we're seeing is in the areas of medicinal genomics, where you can do a DNA sequencing of a person. It could be a childhood epileptic, and they're doing this. And then you can identify ahead of time, what the mutations are, if they're going to be likely to be responsive to CBD or not, or if they're going to be likely to trigger a bad reaction, because sometimes CBD can do that. And this is actually happening, this kind of research, and it's very, very exciting.
Thank you. And you, Paul?
My favorite is working with epilepsy. I continue to do that in Europe, where, like I said, we're pulling together 5 different countries and accumulating all this data to really prove that hemp flower extract is effective in treating epilepsy. And this is what I would like to do.
Thank you, Paul. And Charles?
For research, I would really like to take on big pharma. And here's how I would do it. I would get a neutral head of such a project to compare cannabidiol in the whole plant with every one of these toxic big pharma drugs, starting from Prozac to painkillers, on across the board, and just have a controlled trial to see which one works better, and then how cannabidiol helps people as kind of a sidebar get off of those toxic drugs.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, we come to question point. We've just got just about 9 minutes left. If anybody has a question would like to ask of the panel, if you please come to the microphone there. And please make it a question that they can answer. We've limited time.
A couple of quick questions. One is, how can you ensure that you're not buying synthetic CBD? And is there any concrete medical information as to whether CBDs can reverse or at least halt the bone deterioration caused by osteoarthritis?
I'm very sorry. It's very, very hard for us to hear that. Could you just come a little closer? I don't know if the sound guys can.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now? One is, how can you make sure you're not buying synthetic CBD? And the other is there any concrete medical information as to whether CBDs can reverse or at least halt the bone deterioration caused by osteoarthritis?
Okay, gentlemen, who would like to take that one?
Well, in terms of the latter part of it, in terms of osteoarthritis, certainly the endocannabinoid system is involved in regulating bone formation and absorption. And if you can target that system, in theory, with certain pharmacological agents, either cannabinoids, synthetic, or from the plant, potentially you can mitigate the pace of that deterioration. And I think that that's been shown at least in animal studies. And anecdotally, we hear from people who are struggling with that illness something similar when they're smoking marijuana as part of their health regimen. But that's anecdotal. But the anecdotal matches the preclinical. It's just we're missing the clinical because of prohibition.
Okay, and any comments on avoiding synthetic CBD? I guess know your source. I guess that's probably your fun. Know who you're purchasing from.
It's a problem because it's available on the internet. It's not so much that it's synthetic. It's the synthetic CBD will eventually come from the pharmaceutical companies, but it's almost pure CBD extracted and refined very heavily from industrial hemp is what's out there. You buy something on the internet, it's good luck. I mean, hope it helps.
Buyer beware. Okay, another question, please, sir.
Hi, I'm J-Mac. My question is for Hayley. First of all, congratulations on your cannabis use and the use of it to stop your seizures. My question is, what is your preferred method of ingestion of cannabis?
What is your preferred method of ingestion?
Yeah. I'm listening, Hayley.
Are you talking specifically for Hayley here?
Yeah.
Okay.
She has CP and she
Cheryl?
has all the disabilities. There's the pipe, right? So I don't know the preferred method.
Okay, thank you. Hayley?
I take it with capsules and some smoke and a vaporizer.
Capsules and a vaporizer.
Her capsules are her staple medicine, so she takes that 3 times a day, and we have it down to standardized dosing. And then she takes her inhaled from a vaporizer as needed for any aura symptoms or pain.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for your question.
This question was actually asked at the end, but it wasn't really answered. It was one that I had from before. Which cannabinoids do you think are being ignored for their potential value, specifically CBN, CBC, CBG, that you think could be very valuable?
I think they could all be very valuable. It really depends on what you're using them for, what their concentration is, how they're extracted. There's huge medical future in CBG and THCV. They all seem to have some sort of activity, but we have to elucidate it. We don't have the research yet, so it's difficult to say.
Okay, thank you.
In an unregulated market that we're in, a lot of people need medicine now, and I'd like to know if you guys have advice on how people can do research to purchase products and know that they're getting what it actually claims to be.
Testing. You need to use a laboratory to have your product tested.
I think it all comes down to trial and error. You know, all of medicine is trial and error. All of life is trial and error. And so with my patients, if they say something doesn't work, I say, well, let's talk about what else we could try that might work. And we just keep trying. And until we get, firm research that really tells us by degrees which one works the best.
Okay, let me just clarify a little bit. A lot of people are concerned about people being honest about what they're growing with, and contaminants such as the fertilizers and rinsing and this type of thing, and that goes into everything from the capsules to the concentrates, and that's a huge concern for people who already are dealing with medical situations. So that's kind of what I was wondering about. And you were saying have it tested. So who does this testing and where can people go?
It's a quagmire, and I think there's going to be a panel on addressing some of these issues with pesticide and solvent residues and other environmental issues in terms of cannabis growing. You put your finger on something really key. It's a huge problem in the States, I can tell you what you're talking about. It really speaks for the importance of good regulation. You know, the problem with the cannabis, one of the problems in the cannabis community, we've had such a difficult time with authorities and law enforcement and people who regulated it all wrong by making it illegal, and it was sort of, swing back in the other direction of no regulation. But really, endocannabinoid system is all about homeostasis, about maintaining balance, and I think we need the right kind of regulations to balance this industry, because when you talk about big money coming in, the money is the first concern, not about parts per billionth of something that shouldn't be in there. It's also very expensive to test this stuff, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow on a panel.
Thank you, Martin.
This is a question for Dr. Whitfield relating to your experience, sir, in the use of cannabinoids in addiction medicine and management of withdrawal. Do you have any experience comparing that with the use of Subutex, or which is also known as buprenorphine for managing withdrawal? Does one work better than the other, or can you elaborate on that, please?
Well, for those of you who may not know, buprenorphine is this long-acting painkiller that takes away withdrawal from the other painkillers but it doesn't mess you up, except for one way it messes you up. You still can't get off of buprenorphine with ease. So it's got to be, buprenorphine has to be tapered slowly over time. And my patients don't want to get off of it because buprenorphine is just like the other opiates. It's a potent antidepressant, meaning it's a stimulant. It gives them energy. It gives them energy, it relaxes them, but it gives them motivation and mojo, for that slang word. So it's really a double-edged sword, buprenorphine, because it lets them function, but then they can't get off of it, or they don't want to get off of it. So I use cannabidiol, and they use the full plant, smoked or ingested, to sleep better and to get off of the buprenorphine.
Thank you. I do apologise, but we're out of time. I'm sorry the clock is running against us, and I see there's still two of you. I need to cut it short, right? I do apologise. Can I? Question? I'm sorry, no, maybe you could ask. I hope the experts will make themselves available immediately following this, but I've been directed to keep to a tight time schedule. I would just quickly like to say, I hope you'll all join me in thanking from the far end, Cheryl, the mother of Hayley, Martin Lee, Paul Hornby and Charles Whitfield. Thank you very much for your attention.